Adrian Cole pressed his palm against the cold metal wall of the medical bay, trying to steady his breathing. The distress signal had come through on a frequency that shouldn't exist, a channel so old and abandoned that most people had forgotten it was ever used. Someone or something was calling for help in the forgotten spaces beneath Galactic Station Meridian, in the sectors where nobody went anymore. He pulled his scanner from his coat pocket and checked the readings again. Life signs fatting fast. Whatever was down there wouldn't last another hour. Adrian glanced at the duty roster displayed on the wall screen. His shift had ended 20 minutes ago. He could walk away, go back to his quarters, pretend he never heard the signal. That would be the smart choice, the safe choice. Instead, he found himself moving toward the maintenance elevator that led to the lower decks. The descent took 3 minutes, and with each passing second, the temperature dropped. These levels were kept minimal, just enough to prevent the station's structure from warping in the cold of space. Adrian's breath formed small clouds as he stepped out into a corridor lined with supply containers and defunct machinery. The emergency lighting cast everything in shades of amber and shadow. His scanner pulled him deeper into the maze of abandoned storage areas. He climbed over a fallen support beam, squeezed through a gap where 2 containers had shifted, and finally emerged into a small chamber that had once been used for quarantine procedures. The medical symbols on the walls were faded, barely visible. And there in the corner, curled into a ball no bigger than a small dog, was a Drakari infant. Adrian's heart stopped. He knew what he was looking at, knew the razor-sharp scales that covered its body, the small horns just beginning to emerge from its skull, the tail that ended in a barbed tip. Drakari were apex predators, creatures so dangerous that the Galactic Council had declared them a threat to civilized space. Their homeworld was under permanent quarantine. Contact was forbidden. Interference was punishable by exile. The infant raised its head, and Adrian saw its eyes. They were golden, like molten copper, and filled with something he hadn't expected to see in a predator species. Fear, pain, desperation. The creature's scales were dull gray instead of the lustrous bronze they should have been. Its sides heaved with each labored breath. Dark stains marked the floor where it had been sick, its body rejecting whatever food it had tried to eat. Adrian didn't need his medical training to recognize starvation. The infant was dying. He should call station security. That was protocol. They would handle it, remove the creature, file the appropriate reports. Adrian's hands moved toward his communicator, then stopped. The infant made a sound, soft and broken, like wind through a damaged pipe. It wasn't a threat or a warning. It was a plea. Adrian knelt down, moving slowly. The Drakari infant tracked his movement but didn't retreat or attack. Its body tensed, muscles coiled, but it simply watched, waiting. He pulled out his medical scanner and ran a full diagnostic. The results made him wince. Severe malnutrition, multiple organ systems beginning to fail, body temperature dropping below safe levels. The infant needed food, but not just any food. Drakari physiology required specific proteins, amino acid chains that existed naturally in their home ecosystem, but nowhere else in the known galaxy. Adrian sat back on his heels, mind racing. The station didn't stock Drakari nutrients. Why would it? The species was forbidden. But if he could synthesize something, break down the molecular structure and rebuild it using available compounds, there might be a chance. The infant's breathing hitched, becoming more shallow. Time was running out. Adrian made his decision. He scooped the creature into his arms, surprised by how light it was, how fragile. The Drakari didn't fight him. It curled against his chest, seeking warmth, and Adrian felt the rapid flutter of its heartbeat through his coat. Getting back to the elevator was harder with his hands full. He had to move carefully, shifting the infant's weight to maintain balance as he climbed and squeezed through the obstacles. When the elevator doors finally closed and the car began to rise, Adrian accessed his personal lab access codes and routed the elevator directly to his private research space. The lab was small but well-equipped, a perk of his position as senior xenobiologist. He laid the infant on an examination table and activated the environmental controls, raising the temperature. The Drakari's scales began to shimmer slightly in the warmth, a good sign. Adrian pulled up every file he had on Drakari biology, which wasn't much. The species had been classified as hostile before proper scientific study could be conducted. Most of what existed in the database came from autopsy, reports of adults killed in territorial conflicts or failed first contact attempts. He started working, pulling compounds from storage, running molecular simulations, testing combinations. Hours passed. The infant drifted in and out of consciousness, its body struggling to maintain basic functions. Adrian's eyes burned from staring at screens, his hands cramped from precise measuring and mixing. Then his terminal chimed. The station's security AI had flagged unusual energy signatures and chemical processes in his lab. Someone would come to investigate. He had minutes at most. Adrian stared at the amber warning light pulsing on his terminal. The security AI was smart, designed to detect anything unusual, anything that might threaten station safety. His synthesis work had triggered multiple flags, chemical combinations that shouldn't exist together, energy spikes from accelerated molecular bonding, heat signatures that didn't match normal research parameters. He had two choices: shut everything down and hide the Drakari infant, though where he could hide a dying alien creature on a space station he had no idea, or keep working and hope he could create something to save its life before security arrived. The infant whimpered on the examination table, its breathing reduced to shallow gasps. Its scales had lost all luster, turning the color of ash. Adrian kept working. His hands moved across the controls, adjusting formulas, running new simulations. The Drakari homeworld had been studied briefly before the quarantine, just enough to catalog basic environmental data. The native prey animals there contained a protein structure unlike anything found elsewhere, a triple helix formation that Drakari digestive systems required. Without it, they couldn't process nutrients properly. But Adrian didn't have access to those prey animals. He didn't have samples from the Drakari homeworld. What he had was a fully equipped genetics lab and a desperate willingness to try something dangerous. He pulled up his own medical records, his genetic profile, his blood chemistry data. Humans were adaptable, their biology flexible in ways most species weren't. It was why they survived in so many different environments, why they could eat such a wide variety of foods, why their immune systems learned and adjusted. What if he could use that adaptability? Adrian loaded a sample of his own blood plasma into the synthesizer. The machine hummed as it broke down the components, mapping every molecule. He began manipulating the protein structures, forcing them to twist into new configurations, adding elements from his lab's chemical library, creating something that had never existed before. The door to his lab slid open. Dr. Nalith stood in the entrance, her silver skin reflecting the lab's blue work lights. She was Velori, tall and graceful, with 4 arms that she currently had crossed over her chest in a gesture Adrian recognized as concern. "Adrian, what are you doing?" The security system sent alerts to half the science division. Her multiple eyes focused on the examination table, and she went very still. "Is that a Drakari?" "It's dying," Adrian said, not looking up from his work. "It's an infant abandoned, starving. I need 10 more minutes." Nalith stepped inside and the door closed behind her. She moved closer to the table, studying the infant with a researcher's careful attention. "This is illegal. You know this is illegal. Harboring a Drakari violates 7 different council regulations. You could be exiled for this." "I know." "Then why?" She stopped as the infant made that broken sound again, the one that was almost like crying. Nalith's skin rippled, colors shifting across her surface in patterns Adrian had learned to read as emotional responses. Purple for surprise, green for conflict, yellow for concern. "How long does it have?" she asked quietly. "Without intervention, an hour, maybe less." The synthesizer beeped. Adrian grabbed the output vial. A dark liquid that looked nothing like blood or food or anything organic. It was his blood plasma, restructured and rebuilt at a molecular level, infused with every nutrient compound he thought might help. The protein chains were crude approximations of what Drakari biology needed, forced into similar structures through chemical bonding that might hold together long enough to be absorbed. It might work, it might kill the infant faster, he had no way to know. "This is insane," Nalith said, but she wasn't leaving. "You're going to inject an experimental compound created from human genetic material into an alien predator species that we barely understand." "Yes." Adrian loaded the compound into a medical injector, calibrated for subcutaneous delivery. The infant didn't move as he approached, didn't even seem aware of him anymore. Its eyes were half closed, the golden light in them dimming. He pressed the injector against the softer scales near the creature's shoulder and activated it. The compound flowed into the infant's body, spreading through its bloodstream. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the infant convulsed. Adrian's hands moved on instinct, steadying the creature, monitoring its vital signs on the scanner. The reading spiked wildly, heart rate accelerating, body temperature rising, neural activity intensifying. "It's rejecting it," Nalith said, stepping closer. "Its immune system is attacking the compound as a foreign substance." "Wait," Adrian said, "just wait." The convulsions slowed. The infant's breathing deepened, becoming more regular. Color began to return to its scales, gray shifting toward bronze. The reading stabilized, still elevated but no longer in crisis. The infant opened its eyes fully and looked at Adrian. Really looked at him with an awareness that hadn't been there before. It made a sound, different from the earlier whimpering, almost curious. Then it moved. Slowly, weakly, but it moved. The infant pushed itself up on unsteady legs and took 2 wobbling steps across the examination table before sitting down heavily. It tilted its head, studying Adrian with those golden eyes. "By the stars," Nalith whispered. "It worked. Your insane experiment actually worked." Adrian felt something release in his chest, tension he didn't know he'd been holding. The infant was alive, still weak, still in danger, but alive. The door chimed. Someone was requesting access. Nalith's colors shifted to deep purple, alarm. "That's security. Commander Hess must have been notified." Adrian looked at the infant, who was now watching the door with obvious wariness. Its tail curled around its body, barbs extending slightly. Even starved and weak, predator instincts remained. "What are you going to do?" Nalith asked. Adrian moved to stand between the door and the examination table. "I'm going to fight for this life. The same thing I'd do for any patient." The door slid open, revealing Commander Hess and 4 security officers in full tactical gear. Commander Hess walked into the lab like he owned it, which technically he did. Everything on Galactic Station Meridian fell under his authority. He was Turvan, built like a boulder with gray skin that looked carved from stone. His expression matched his appearance, hard and unyielding. "Dr. Cole, step away from the examination table." Adrian didn't move. "This is a medical situation, Commander. I have a patient who requires ongoing care." "That's not a patient. That's a Drakari, a prohibited species under Galactic Conservation Authority regulations. You've violated quarantine protocols, endangered station personnel, and committed at least 6 criminal acts that I can name off the top of my head." Hess gestured to his security team. "Remove the creature." 2 officers moved forward. Adrian shifted his position, blocking their path. Under medical sanctuary laws, any sentient being in critical condition on a registered medical facility has the right to treatment. Check your regulations, Commander. Section 42, subsection 9. Hess's expression darkened. That law applies to recognized sentient species. Drakari are classified as dangerous fauna, not sentient beings. Then the classification is wrong. Adrian pulled up the scans he'd taken, projecting them onto the lab's main screen. Look at these brain patterns. This infant shows neural complexity consistent with sentient thought, problem-solving capability, emotional processing, self-awareness indicators. Irrelevant. Drakari adults have destroyed 3 colonies, killed thousands of people. The species is too dangerous to allow propagation. Hess stepped closer to the table. That thing will grow into a killer. Better to end it now humanely before it becomes a threat. The Drakari infant, which had been watching the exchange with obvious attention, suddenly moved. It placed itself between Adrian and Commander Hess, small body tense, tail raised. A low rumble came from its throat, not quite a growl but clearly a warning. Everyone froze. See, Hess said, aggressive behavior, it's already showing predator characteristics. No, Dr. Naleth said, speaking up from where she stood near the workstation. That's protective behavior. The infant positioned itself between perceived threat and someone it has bonded with. That's not aggression, Commander, that's trust. Hess looked at her, then back at the infant. Drakari don't bond. They're solitary hunters from birth. Every behavioral study confirms this. Every behavioral study was conducted on adults taken from a destroyed ecosystem and kept in captivity, Adrian said. We've never observed natural Drakari development. We don't know what they're capable of when raised without trauma. The infant made a sound, softer now, almost questioning. It glanced back at Adrian, and he saw something in those golden eyes that made his chest tight. The creature was afraid, but it wasn't running. It was standing its ground between him and danger. Protecting him. I want this thing off my station, Hess said. Now, I'm calling Galactic Conservation Authority to collect it. They'll euthanize it, Adrian said flatly. You know they will. They'll call it mercy, but it's murder. It's policy. A policy created after Drakari attacks killed my brother and 47 other people on Colony Station Magnus. Hess's voice went cold. I won't risk lives for your experiment in compassion, Doctor. Adrian felt those words like a physical blow. He hadn't known about Hess's brother, hadn't understood the personal weight behind the commander's position. But it didn't change the facts. It didn't change the infant watching them with intelligent, fearful eyes. I'm sorry about your brother, Adrian said carefully. But killing this infant won't bring him back, and it won't make the galaxy any safer if we're wrong about Drakari nature. Wrong? Dozens of incidents, hundreds of deaths, and you think we're wrong. I think we've only seen traumatized survivors of a species we nearly exterminated. I think we've never given them a chance to be anything else. Adrian moved slowly, reaching down to touch the infant's head. It pressed against his hand, seeking comfort. This individual is different because it's been shown kindness. What if that's all it takes? What if Drakari aren't born killers but made into them by how we treat them? One of the security officers, a young woman with blue skin and facial markings that identified her as Selkari, lowered her weapon slightly. Commander, the doctor might have a point. My species was classified as hostile once too, before the war ended and we joined the council. Hess shot her a look that could cut steel. This is different. Is it? Dr. Naleth pulled up more data, her 4 hands working multiple controls simultaneously. I've been reviewing Adrian's scans while you were talking. The infant's brain structure shows neuroplasticity far beyond what we expected. Its behavior has already adapted based on environmental input. If raised in a peaceful environment, there's no biological reason it would develop violent tendencies. Theory, Hess said, speculation not worth the risk. Adrian felt a desperation rising in him. The infant was breathing steadily now, growing stronger with each passing minute as the synthetic compound did its work. He'd saved its life, pulled it back from the edge of death, and now politics and fear would end it anyway. Then the infant did something unexpected. It stepped forward, moving away from Adrian, approaching Commander Hess directly. The security team tensed, weapons rising, but the creature didn't attack. It sat down in front of Hess, tilted its head up to look at him, and made a soft trilling sound. Curious, friendly, completely non-threatening. Hess stared down at it, something flickering across his stone features. Pain, maybe. Memory. The infant reached out one small clawed hand, not swiping or attacking, just extending it toward the commander in what looked like an attempt at connection. "Don't," Hess said, but his voice had lost its hard edge. "Don't make this harder than it is." "I'm requesting a formal hearing," Adrian said quickly. "Medical sanctuary laws entitle me to one. 24 hours to present evidence that this individual deserves protection. A hearing won't change the facts." "Then you have nothing to lose by granting one. And if I'm wrong, if the evidence supports euthanasia, I'll accept that decision." Hess stood silent for a long moment, looking down at the infant who still had its small hand extended toward him. Finally, he stepped back. 24 hours. But that creature stays in containment, and you stay under station arrest. If anything goes wrong, if it shows any sign of dangerous behavior, we end this immediately. Adrian nodded. It wasn't a victory, but it was a chance. The containment cell was designed for dangerous specimens, with reinforced walls and an observation window that allowed monitoring without direct contact. Adrian hated seeing the Drakari infant in there, packing the small space like a caged animal. But it was the compromise that kept it alive for now. He'd spent the past 18 hours preparing his case, compiling data, running additional tests, and reaching out to every xenobiologist contact he had. Dr. Nalith worked alongside him, her initial caution transformed into something like determination. She'd seen what he'd seen, the intelligence in those golden eyes, the potential for something different. The hearing was scheduled in 6 hours, and Adrian still didn't have enough evidence. Brain scans and behavioral observations were compelling, but not conclusive. The council would want proof, hard data showing that Drakari could coexist peacefully with other species. Data he couldn't provide from a single infant he'd known for less than a day. A knock on his quarters door pulled him from his research. He opened it to find Dr. Nalith accompanied by 3 people he didn't recognize. 2 humans and an insectoid chithar, all wearing civilian clothes but moving with purpose. "Adrian, these people need to speak with you," Nalith said, her colors shifting to warm orange, excitement mixed with nervousness. The older human woman stepped forward. She had gray hair pulled back in a practical bun and eyes that carried deep sadness. "Dr. Cole, my name is Ruth Adler. I run a supply depot on the frontier station Outer Reach. I heard through channels what you're trying to do. I need to show you something." She pulled out a small hollow projector and activated it. An image appeared, showing a young Drakari, larger than the infant but not yet fully grown, sitting peacefully in what looked like a cargo bay. A group of human children were playing around it, laughing, completely unafraid. Adrian stared. "What is this?" "This is Cinder. We found him 3 years ago, abandoned on a derelict ship. Like your infant, he was starving. My engineer managed to synthesize food for him and we kept him hidden." Ruth's voice softened. "He's never hurt anyone, not once. He helps with cargo loading, uses his fire breath to weld repairs. The children love him." The younger human man, barely out of his teens, spoke next. "I'm Parker from mining colony Obsidian Deep. We've got a Drakari female living in the ventilation systems. She hunts the rock rats that eat through our equipment. Been there 2 years, completely peaceful." The Chithar clicked its mandibles in agreement. "Station Gamma 7. One Drakari male rescued from poachers 5 years ago. He works in engineering, precise heat control for delicate electronics. Saved 12 lives during a reactor breach by containing a fire with his breath while others evacuated. Adrian looked at Nalith, who was practically glowing with satisfaction. I put out discreet inquiries through scientific channels. Turns out you're not the only one who's been hiding rescued Drakari. There are at least 7 we've found so far, probably more who haven't come forward. Why haven't any of you reported this? Adrian asked. Ruth's expression hardened. Because we knew what would happen. The council would take them, kill them, claim it was for the greater good. We chose to protect them instead. But now you're revealing yourselves. Why? Because you're fighting in the open, Parker said. Because you're giving us a chance to change the system instead of just hiding from it. If you can prove to the council that Drakari can be peaceful, you save not just your infant but all of ours too. Adrian felt hope bloom in his chest, real hope for the first time since this started. Will you testify at the hearing? We're already here, Ruth said. We brought documentation, video evidence, testimony from dozens of people who have interacted with our Drakari. If the council wants to ignore this, they'll have to do it while looking all of us in the eye. The next few hours were a blur of organization. Adrian compiled the new evidence, integrated it with his own research, built a case that was no longer theoretical but proven. Drakari raised with kindness and respect became peaceful, productive members of multi-species communities. Every single documented case supported the same conclusion. When the hearing finally convened in the station's main council chamber, Adrian walked in with confidence he hadn't felt before. The chamber was designed to accommodate multiple species, with varied seating and atmospheric controls. Ambassador Roth presided, a tall Keltharian whose crystalline skin refracted light in sharp angles. He'd lost colleagues to Drakari attacks, Adrian knew from the records. This wouldn't be easy. Commander Hess sat in the security section, his expression unreadable. Other council members filled their designated areas, representing the major species that govern the sector. And in the observation gallery, Adrian saw station personnel, scientists, even some of the children who'd been sneaking visits to see the Drakari infant. The infant itself was present, contained in a secure, transparent enclosure that allowed it to be seen, but prevented any physical interaction. It watched the proceedings with clear attention, head moving to track different speakers. Dr. Cole, Ambassador Roth's voice resonated through the chamber like struck crystal. You've requested this hearing to challenge Galactic Conservation Authority's classification of Drakari as prohibited fauna. Present your case. Adrian stood, activating his presentation. Distinguished members, I'm here to prove that Drakari are sentient beings capable of peaceful coexistence, and that our current policies are based on incomplete understanding. He walked them through everything. The brain scans showing neural complexity, the behavioral observations demonstrating learning and emotional bonding, the infant's protective response, its attempts at communication, its rapid adaptation to a non-threatening environment. Then he introduced Ruth, Parker, and the others. One by one, they presented their evidence. Videos of peaceful Drakari helping with daily tasks, testimony from people whose lives had been enriched or even saved by the creatures they'd sheltered, data showing years of cohabitation without a single violent incident. The council members listened, some with obvious skepticism, others with growing interest. Ambassador Roth remained expressionless, his crystalline features revealing nothing. When the presentations ended, the prosecution spoke. A Valori lawyer named Thex outlined the historical record of Drakari violence, the colony attacks, the deaths. He didn't dispute Adrian's evidence but argued it represented isolated cases, too small a sample to justify changing established policy. These examples show what's possible under ideal conditions, Thex said. But we cannot assume all Drakari will respond the same way. The risk is too great. Adrian stood to respond, but before he could speak, something happened in the chamber. The Drakari infant pressed against its enclosure, making sounds that resonated through the space. Not random sounds, patterns, rhythms that matched speech cadences. It was trying to talk. The chamber went silent. Everyone in the council chamber stared at the Drakari infant. The creature pressed both small hands against the transparent wall of its enclosure, golden eyes fixed on Ambassador Roth. The sounds it made were crude, unformed, but they had structure. Syllables attempting to connect, meaning trying to emerge. Adrian's scanner was already out, recording everything. The infant's neural activity had spiked, language centers lighting up like stars. It was learning, processing the speech patterns it had been hearing, trying to replicate them. Impossible, Thex said, but his voice lacked conviction. Drakari don't have vocal structures for complex communication. They have vocal structures we never properly studied, Dr. Nalith countered, pulling up anatomical scans. Because we classified them as animals before we understood what they were capable of. The infant made another sound, clearer this time, something that might have been trying to approximate a word. It looked frustrated when the sound didn't come out right, tail lashing once before it tried again. Ambassador Roth leaned forward, his crystalline body refracting the chamber's light into scattered rainbows. How long has it been attempting speech? This is the first time, Adrian said. It's responding to environmental stimulus, to the hearing itself. It understands that communication matters here and it's trying to participate. One of the council members, an elderly Selkari woman named Council Myra, rose from her seat. May I approach the enclosure? Roth nodded permission. Myra walked slowly toward the infant, her blue skin marked with the wisdom patterns of her species' elders. She'd been quiet throughout the hearing, listening but not commenting. Now she stood before the enclosure and spoke directly to the infant in a gentle voice. Little one, can you understand me? The infant tilted its head, considering. Then it lifted one clawed hand and pressed it against the transparent wall where Myra stood. She raised her own hand to match the gesture, separated only by the barrier. I lost family to Drakari attacks, Myra said quietly. On Colony Station Magnus, the same incident that took Commander Hess's brother, I came to this hearing prepared to vote for termination. She paused, looking into the infant's eyes. But I'm seeing something different now. Not a monster, a child. The infant made that trilling sound again, the same one it had made when approaching Hess earlier. Curious, friendly, seeking connection. The question isn't whether this individual is dangerous, Myra continued, still addressing the infant but speaking loud enough for the chamber to hear. The question is what made the others dangerous. What trauma, what pain, what fear turned them into the creatures that attacked us? She turned to face the council. My people were once considered monsters too. Before we learned to communicate, before we understood other species' intentions, we defended our territory with lethal force. Hundreds died in early contact incidents. Should we have been exterminated for that? Or should we have been given the chance to learn, to grow, to become what we are now? Thex stood. Council Myra, with respect, the Selkari were clearly attempting communication from the beginning. The Drakari have shown only violence. Have they? Or have we only given them violence in return? Myra gestured to the screen showing Ruth's video of Cinder playing with human children. These hidden Drakari prove that when offered kindness, they respond with kindness. When offered cooperation, they cooperate. We've been creating the very threat we fear by treating them as enemies from first contact. Adrian seized the moment. I'd like to propose a formal study. Allow the rescued Drakari to remain where they are, under observation and regular evaluation. Monitor their development, their behavior, their integration into their communities. Give us 2 years of documented evidence, and if there's any indication of dangerous behavior, we accept the Council's judgment. And if they prove peaceful, Ambassador Roth asked. Then we remove Drakari from the prohibited species list. We establish rehabilitation protocols for any others found abandoned or orphaned. We give them the same chance we give every other sentient species in the galaxy. Roth sat back, his crystalline features catching the light. This is unprecedented. The Council has never reversed a species classification based on such limited evidence. Then maybe it's time we did, Commander Hess said. Every head turned toward him. He stood slowly from his seat in the security section, his stone features set in an expression Adrian couldn't read. I came here ready to end that infant's life, Hess continued, to prevent another tragedy like the one that killed my brother. But Council Myra is right. We've been responding to trauma with more trauma, violence with more violence. It hasn't made us safer. It's just created more pain on both sides. He walked toward the enclosure. The infant watched him approach, body tensing but not retreating. Hess stopped a few feet away. My brother died protecting colonists from a Drakari attack. He was a good man, a brave man. He wouldn't want his death used as justification for killing children. Hess's voice roughened. He'd want it to mean something, to prevent future deaths, not cause them. The infant moved to the section of the enclosure closest to Hess and sat down, head tilted up to look at him. After a moment, it made a sound, low and mournful, like it understood sadness even if it couldn't speak the words. Hess closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, he looked at Ambassador Roth. I vote in favor of Dr. Cole's proposal. 2 years of supervised study. If these Drakari can prove themselves peaceful, we owe it to everyone we've lost to try for a different future. The chamber erupted in murmured conversation. Council members conferred with advisors. Adrian stood frozen, hardly daring to hope. Ambassador Roth raised a hand and silence fell. This decision cannot be made lightly. We'll take a recess to deliberate. The vote will be held in 1 hour. The longest hour of Adrian's life followed. He sat with Dr. Nalith, Ruth, Parker, and the others who'd come to testify. They didn't speak much, the weight of waiting too heavy for casual conversation. The infant remained in its enclosure, occasionally making those attempting speech sounds, as if practicing for when it could finally form words. When the council reconvened, Adrian felt his heart hammering against his ribs. This was it. Everything came down to the next few minutes. Ambassador Roth stood. The council has reviewed all evidence presented. We've considered the historical record, the recent testimonies, and the unprecedented nature of this request. He paused, light fragmenting through his crystalline body. By a vote of 8-3, with 2 abstentions, the council grants conditional approval to Dr. Cole's proposal. Adrian felt his knees weaken with relief. The Drakari currently in protective custody will remain with their caretakers under the following conditions, Roth continued. Regular medical and behavioral evaluations, quarterly reports to the Galactic Conservation Authority, immediate notification of any aggressive incidents, and Dr. Adrian Cole will serve as lead researcher and coordinator for the study, responsible for ensuring all protocols are followed. I accept, Adrian said immediately. Furthermore, any new Drakari found abandoned or orphaned will be evaluated on a case-by-case basis rather than automatically euthanized. If they meet criteria for rehabilitation potential, they'll be placed in approved care situations. Roth's gaze swept the chamber. We're giving this species a second chance. I pray we're not making a mistake that future generations will pay for. The hearing adjourned. People flooded forward, some to congratulate Adrian, others to express concerns, many simply curious. Through it all, Adrian kept his eyes on the enclosure where the infant waited. Commander Hess approached. You'll need security clearance to move that infant to proper research facilities. I'll have my people work with you on setup. Thank you, Commander. Hess nodded. Don't make me regret this, Doctor. Don't make any of us regret it. I won't, Adrian promised. 3 months later, Galactic Station Meridian had changed in ways nobody expected. The Drakari infant, whom the station's children had insisted on naming Ash despite Adrian's attempts to maintain scientific objectivity, had become something of a local phenomenon. The creature had grown noticeably, now the size of a medium dog rather than a small one, its bronze scales gleaming with health. Adrian walked through the research facility he'd been granted, watching Ash work alongside a team of engineers. The juvenile Drakari was demonstrating precise flame control, using careful bursts of heat to weld support beams for the new medical wing. Each flame was exactly calibrated, exactly placed. No deviation, no accidents. Temperature holding steady at 1500 degrees, the lead engineer, a human named Marcus, reported. Better precision than our automated torches. Ash made a pleased rumbling sound, then turned to look at Adrian. The intelligence in those golden eyes had grown sharper, more focused. The infant was learning faster than any model predicted, absorbing information from every interaction. Ash, break time, Adrian said. The juvenile Drakari immediately stopped working and trotted over, settling beside him with clear contentment. It had learned dozens of commands, understood complex instructions, and was beginning to form actual words. The speech came slowly, Drakari vocal structures not designed for human languages, but progress was measurable. Dr. Nalith approached, her colors shifting through pleased patterns. The quarterly report is ready for transmission to the Council. All behavioral metrics remain positive. No aggressive incidents from any of the study subjects. How are the others doing? Adrian asked. Ruth reports Cinder has started teaching himself basic mathematics. He's helping with inventory management now. Parker's Drakari female apparently prevented a mine collapse by reinforcing a failing support structure before anyone realized it was compromised. And the Gamma 7 male just received formal employment as a station engineer. Adrian smiled. 7 Drakari, 7 different environments, 7 consistent stories of peaceful integration and active contribution to their communities. The data was becoming impossible to dispute. A group of visitors arrived, led by Ambassador Roth. The Keltharian's crystalline form caught the facility's lights, sending rainbow patterns across the walls. With him were several other council members, here for an official inspection. Dr. Cole, we've come to observe your progress, Roth said. Of course, Ambassador. Ash, we have guests. The juvenile Drakari stood and approached the group carefully. It had learned to move in ways that didn't startle people, to keep its tail relaxed and its claws retracted. Small adaptations that made others comfortable around it. Council Myra knelt down, bringing herself to Ash's eye level. Hello again, little one. You've grown. Ash tilted its head, studying her. Then carefully it spoke. Hello. The word was rough, the sounds not quite right but unmistakably speech. The council members reacted with visible surprise. Roth stepped closer. It can speak. Basic words, yes, Adrian confirmed. Vocabulary is limited, about 20 words so far, but growing weekly. Ash understands far more than it can say. We're working on developing a communication system that works better with Drakari vocal anatomy. Ash looked up at Roth and made a deliberate effort at another word. End. The ambassador was silent for a long moment. Then slowly he lowered himself to one knee. Yes, friend. Ash made that pleased rumbling sound and gently touched Roth's crystalline hand with one clawed finger. The gesture was careful, deliberate, showing awareness of the ambassador's fragile structure. Remarkable, Roth said quietly. I didn't think I'd ever see this. A Drakari choosing connection over violence. Because violence was never their nature, Adrian said. It was their trauma response to how we treated them. Given safety and kindness, they choose cooperation every time. Commander Hess arrived, slightly out of breath. "Sorry I'm late, had a situation in the lower sectors." He paused, seeing Ash standing calmly among the council members. "Everything all right here?" "Better than all right," Roth said, standing. "I'm prepared to recommend to the full council that we advance the timeline for Drakari reclassification. The evidence is conclusive." Adrian felt something release in his chest, a tension he'd been carrying for months. "You mean?" "I mean that in 6 months instead of 2 years, we'll vote on removing Drakari from the prohibited species list. We'll establish official rehabilitation protocols. Any Drakari found orphaned or abandoned will have the option of placement with qualified caretakers rather than automatic termination." Roth looked at Ash. "We'll give them the chance to be what they were always capable of becoming." Over the following weeks, word spread through the galactic community. More people came forward with stories of rescued Drakari, creatures they'd been hiding for years out of fear of council enforcement. Each story was the same: peaceful behavior, eager cooperation, intelligence and emotional depth that defied the old classifications. A movement began, driven by scientists and civilians who'd seen the truth firsthand. Advocacy groups formed. Educational programs started. The narrative around Drakari began to shift from monsters to victims of circumstance, from threats to potential allies. Adrian stood in the observation deck one evening, watching stars wheel past the station's viewport. Ash sat beside him, now large enough that its head reached his waist when sitting. 3 other juvenile Drakari had been brought to the station, rescued from various situations, and all were developing the same peaceful patterns. They'd formed a group, the young Drakari, playing together in ways that researchers had never documented. Gentle wrestling, sharing food, making those musical sounds that might have been their natural form of communication. Creating the first Drakari community raised without trauma. "Adrian," Ash's voice was still rough, but the word was clear. He looked down at the juvenile. "Yes." "More, come," Ash gestured toward the stars with its tail. "More Drakari." "Maybe. We're sending teams to search for others who might need help, to find any who were abandoned or lost." Ash made a thoughtful sound. "Good should be together, should be safe." Adrian felt his throat tighten. The juvenile understood not just its own situation, but the plight of its entire species. It wanted to help others the way it had been helped. "You're going to change the galaxy," Adrian said quietly. "All of you. You're proving that enemies can become friends, that fear can transform into understanding, that second chances matter." Ash leaned against him, warm and solid and alive. "Friends matter." "Yes," Adrian agreed. "Friends matter most of all." 6 months later, the council voted. 12-1 in favor of reclassification, with detailed rehabilitation protocols and support systems for Drakari integration. The prohibited species list was amended for the first time in galactic history. Within a year, 37 Drakari had been found and placed in protective care. Within 2 years, that number reached over 100. Each one adapted to peaceful coexistence. Each one chose connection over violence when given the choice. The Drakari homeworld quarantine was modified to allow supervised rehabilitation efforts. Teams went in to assess the damage, to understand what could be restored. They found surviving Drakari, traumatized and frightened, hiding in the ruins of their civilization. And slowly, carefully, they began the work of healing. Adrian continued his research, but his role evolved. He became a bridge between species, helping others understand that fear and violence were learned responses, not inevitable destinies. That every sentient being deserved the chance to choose who they wanted to become. And Ash, the starving infant he'd found in an abandoned corridor, grew into something extraordinary. Not just a peaceful Drakari, but a leader, helping other rescued juveniles adapt, teaching them the words for friend and safe and home, creating a new future for a species that had almost been lost to fear and misunderstanding. The medical wing Ash had helped build open to patients from every species in the sector, and on the dedication plaque, beneath the list of engineers and architects, one name stood out in recognition of unprecedented contribution. Ash, first Drakari citizen of Meridian Station. The galaxy was learning, slowly, imperfectly, but learning, that monsters were made, not born, that second chances could transform everything, that sometimes the bravest act was choosing compassion over fear. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, other species watched and wondered if they too might be given the chance to be something different than what they'd been forced to become.